Hello and welcome back, future scientists. I'm Mr. K with Mississippi Public Broadcasting. We've been talking about ecology a lot over the past couple weeks, so today what I wanted to do is just look at a few review questions. These are questions that have come from old state tested questions, so these are questions that are going to be very similar to what you'll see when you take the state test, and they're just a little different than the type of question that you normally get. They're kind of in depth, and you really got to be able to think through them. So I wanted to review these with you just for some practice, and that way when you take the state test at the end of the year, you'll be all good to go. So teacher, if you could, why don't y'all take 10 or 15 minutes to work on this first, and then when you're ready, come back to me, play the video, and I'll do them on the board behind me. All right, I'm sure that didn't give y'all any problem, but just in case it did, let's go ahead and review them on the board and make sure to add or change anything that you don't have. So let's take a look at this. So this one says, the table includes descriptions of 4 different types of relationships between organisms. Record the number of each relationship in the table to correctly identify which type of relationship each description represents. So we've got 4 different descriptions, and we've got 4 of those different types of symbiotic relationships, and it's our job to pick which ones best fit the description. So let's look over these and see what we can come up with. Okay, the first description up here says a king snake stalks a small mouse before constricting it and eating it whole. Well, to me, this is a great example of predation, right? We've got a predator and a prey. A snake is stalking or preying on the mouse, so I think that's a great example of predation. Let's look at the next one, number 2. A tapeworm enters a host's digestive system and feeds on digested food. To me, this is a great example of parasitism. The tapeworm is living off of the host. It's not killing it outright, but it is hurting its host a little bit. So it's a win-lose situation. Let's go to the next one. An oxpecker bird lands on the back of a rhinoceros and feeds on parasites while being protected from predators. Okay, so this one's a little tricky. Let's kind of think our way through it. So we've got this bird, okay, and it likes to sit on the back of these rhinos. The bird eats the parasites that are on the rhino's back. So to me, it really seems like this could be a win-win because the bird is getting food, right? The bird is eating those parasites, and the rhino doesn't have to worry about those parasites, right? Getting rid of parasites is a good thing. So this is a win-win situation. The bird is getting food, and the rhino is getting its parasites taken care of. So that's mutualism, which again is a win-win situation. Let's look at this last one here. Barnacles grow on the skin of a whale, leaving it unharmed while filtering food as the whale swims. So the barnacle is getting food, and the whale is not being benefited or harmed. So that's a great example of commensalism, where one organism benefits and the other one is neither harmed nor benefits from it. So those are our answers for that first one. Let's move on to the next one. All right, so this is an energy pyramid. An energy pyramid can be used to model the biomass at each trophic level, okay? We've looked at these a little bit in the past. All right, this says, part 1, which trophic level has the least biomass? Well, there's really 2 ways you can think about this. One, we've talked about how the producers always have the most energy, and that every time you work your way up, you lose some of that energy and you lose some of that biomass, right? And so we would know by thinking about it like that, that A, the shark, is definitely going to have the least amount of biomass. Another way to think about it is just to look at the shape. It's a pyramid, right? Which part of the pyramid is the biggest? The base, right? The base is the biggest. It has to be because it supports everything above it. Which part of the pyramid is always the smallest? It's the top, right? So the top is going to be the smallest there, right? Okay, great. So let's look at part B. What we're doing here is it's telling us that the phytoplankton contains 10,000 kilocalories of energy. And what we want to do is figure out how much energy is at each of these different levels. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to write this 10,000 out here, okay? So we're starting off with 10,000 kilocalories at the phytoplankton level. What we want to do is figure out how much energy is at each one of these other levels, okay? Well, remember that only 10% of the energy from one level makes it to the next. We lose 90% of our energy. That math might seem kind of hard, but all you have to do here to find 10% of 10,000 is you just remove one of the zeros, and we're going to do that every time. So what's 10% of 10,000? 1,000. All I did was take away one of the zeros. Okay. What is 10% of 1,000? 100. And again, all I did was take away one of those zeros. What's 10% of 100? 10. I took away one of those zeros. What's 10% of 10 is 1. And I just took away one of those zeros. So that's the best way to find out how much energy is at these different levels. You just remove a zero every time because only 10% of the energy makes it off to the next level. That's why you always have the most producers and the least amount of apex predators, because it takes a lot of energy to support an apex predator. Great, let's go to the next one. Okay, this says, the chart below provides information about 4 organisms that live in a Mississippi pond ecosystem. It says, which model best shows the flow of energy between these organisms in the pond ecosystem? Okay, so we've got these stoneflies, which are insects. We have sunfish, which are small fish. We have algae, which are green organisms. And then we have herons, which are birds. So let's see if we can kind of find the right flow of energy here. Okay, well, all food chains start with the same thing on the planet Earth. What is that? All energy for food chains ultimately comes from the sun. So answers that don't start with sun aren't going to be right. So we can cross B out and we can cross D out, okay? So all of our energy is coming from the sun, okay? And then what is the type of organism that can use sunlight to make energy? Those are going to be our producers. Out of these, which one looks like the producer? To me, it's the algae. So that doesn't really help us in between A and C because they both go sunlight and then algae next, okay? So let's see if we can find what comes next after this. So what's going to eat the algae? We kind of have to ask ourselves that. What's going to eat the algae? What's more likely to eat algae? The heron or the stonefly? Well, to me, if you know anything about herons or if you know anything about food chains, herons like to eat fish. They don't eat algae. They eat fish instead. So to me, this looks like the correct line. I think we should go with letter A, because the sunlight starts a food chain, the algae uses it to do photosynthesis, the stoneflies eat the algae, the small fish eat the stoneflies, and then the herons eat the fish. That's the correct flow of energy in this ecosystem, okay? Great, let's keep it going. All right, so here we have these 2 different population growth charts. We've looked at these. On the left, we have an exponential growth chart, and on the right, we have a logistic growth chart. Let's read what the question is asking us. So it says, under ideal circumstances in an environment, a population will grow exponentially. However, in studies of actual populations in various environments, scientists have found that the exponential growth rate of a population may experience for a while will slow down and may eventually level off at a constant rate. This is called logistic growth. The question is, which factor would most likely cause the growth rate of a population to shift from exponential to logistic growth? So the question is really asking, why can't we reproduce at this extremely fast rate? Eventually, a population is going to have to start leveling out kind of like this. Let's look at our answer choice and see if we see something that we like, okay? To me, I like C the most. It says the population consumes food resources as fast as they can be produced. So at this level, about this level, this is about as much food that this environment has to support a population. It can't really go over this line, because if it starts going over this line, all of these organisms are not going to have either food or water or something. And that's going to drive the population down below that line. So I think C is the best answer here. We can't really, if the conditions are perfect, we will maintain this for as long as we can. But there's never enough for everybody. So eventually, things are going to have to start slowing down, and that's when we move into the logistic population growth, okay? All right, let's look at this one. The coral snake uses venom to help kill prey. Coral snakes have a coloration pattern that includes red, yellow, and black bands that circle its body. Many animals see the color pattern and avoid the snake because they know it is venomous. Some other snake species are not as venomous and have similar coloration. As a result, many animals also avoid these snakes, mistaking them for coral snakes. Which type of relationship is shown by these non-venomous snake species? So this is that mimicry. To mimic someone means to copy them, and that's what's happening in this situation. The coral snake is dangerous, and animals would know that. Through evolution and through its natural instincts, they would know to avoid this snake. Its color makes it very obvious. The red, yellow, and black is very easy to see. It's not trying to hide. It's trying to intimidate its predators. It's letting everybody know, hey, you might see me, but if you eat me, I'm gonna bite you and I'm gonna hurt you with this venom. And so they try to avoid the snake. All these other snakes, some other snakes just copy this pattern so they don't so the predators avoid them. So these snakes are copying the coral snake, and to copy something is to mimic it. So mimicry is the best answer here. Great. Let's look at the next one. 16. Tapeworms attach themselves to the inner surface of the intestines in cows and consume some of the passing food material before the cow can obtain the material's nutrients. Which statement best explains the role of tapeworm plays in relation to the cows? Okay, so this is going to be something with a parasite, I think. So let's read this answer choice real quick. Yeah, so this is the best answer. The tapeworm is a parasite. The cow is a host. The parasite is harming the cow. And so that is a great example of parasitism. Okay, great. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, this is what we were talking about in a very recent lesson. This is primary succession versus secondary succession. We're trying to figure out which one's which. So this says, a teacher listed different natural events that at some time have occurred in certain locations across the United States. These events led to primary succession or secondary succession. What they want us to do is record an X in each row to match the 3 events that led to primary succession and the 3 events that led to secondary succession. So we've got these 6 events. We know 3 of them are secondary and 3 of them are primary. And it's our job to figure out which one's which. Okay, so number 1 says landslide along a coast in California. Okay, so a landslide along a coast in California, that's really not going to show or make new land. It's just going to roll down the hill a little bit. So to me, this is really secondary succession. Right? We're not starting from scratch. Okay? Number 2 says a barrier island formation in New Jersey. So because this is an island forming, if it's being brought up out of the ocean, then it's not going to have any, plants growing on it. So that means we're starting from scratch and that this is going to be a form of primary succession. Great, let's go to the next one. Number 3 says advancing of glaciers across Minnesota. Okay, so when a glacier advances, it's going to reveal a lot of land that has not been used previously. And so that means that there's not going to be anything there and we're going to be starting from scratch. So that's an example of primary succession. Okay, let's go to the next one. Fire that released lodgepole pine seed in Colorado. So a fire that destroyed some of these trees, well, that's a great example of secondary succession, okay? Because we're not starting from scratch. We still have our soil. We're just having to start the whole succession process over again. All right, just 2 more on this one. So 5 says volcanic eruption and extensive lava flow in Hawaii. So this is a great example of primary succession. As that volcanic eruption and the lava flows around Hawaii, as it starts to cool off, it could produce new unused land that we haven't used before. And so we're starting from scratch, and so that's going to be primary succession. All right, and then 6 here says straight line wind damage uprooting hardwood trees in Mississippi. Okay, so it's not destroying the soil. We're not starting with new soil. It's just destroying the trees that are there. So this is going to be secondary succession because we're not starting from scratch. Okay? All right, great. I just got a couple more. Y'all hang in there with me. This one says, a farmer built a dam that prevented water from flowing into a pond. The diagram shows the changes to the pond over time. Circle a word or phrase in each set of parentheses to describe the most likely reason for the changes between stages 1 and 4. Okay, so look at that picture for a second, and let's see if we can make this paragraph true by circling the right word. So as the amount of available water increased or decreased, well, it looks like the water decreased. This is what we started with, and in this picture there's no water left. So the water definitely decreased. Okay? The number of woody tree species either decreased, increased, or stay the same. Here in this picture I don't see any trees, and then in this one I see a couple, and then in this one there's a lot of trees. So I would say that the number of woody tree species increased, okay? And the number of plants growing in the water, okay, well, there's a lot of plants here growing in the water, right? And then as time goes on, there's a lot in this one too, but then when you get to this one, there's almost none, and now there's no water in stage 4, and thus there wouldn't be any plants growing in the water. So I would think, and the number of plants growing in the water decreased, okay? So that's what I think we should go with for that one. Okay, let's look at this one. Which statement best describes the ecological succession that takes place after a severe wildfire? Okay, well, if it's a severe wildfire and we're not exposing or making new land, then it's definitely secondary succession. So I think we can cross these off. Remember, primary succession is when you're starting with new soil or you're making new soil. Well, there's nothing in here that would make that happen. It's just a wildfire, so it's destroying the plants, but the soil is going to stay intact there, okay? So secondary succession takes place after a forest fire because only bare rock is exposed, or secondary succession takes place after a forest fire because the affected lands once supported life. Yeah, that's right, B. If it once supported life, then it's secondary succession, right? Great. Okay, here's our last one. Thank y'all so much for hanging in there with me. Let's knock this out of the park, and then we'll get y'all moving into something else. Okay, so this says, deer are brought to an area lush with vegetation and no real predators. The deer population was monitored over time, and population data were recorded as shown in the graph. Which set of statements best describes the data collected? So let's read over these real quick and see if we can find an answer that we liked. I like letter D for this one. The deer population increased rapidly. That's what this part is showing us right here. It's increasing rapidly. See how fast that population is growing? Okay, quickly exceeding the carrying capacity, which it did. This is the carrying capacity. We overshoot. This is called overshoot when you go over the carrying capacity. As the deer population increased, there was less food available, reducing the carrying capacity. So what happens is this part of the population, this is overshoot. This is more than the environment can support. So now we're eating all of the grass. We're drinking all of the water. And what this represents is now, because the population was so high, the carrying capacity decreases a little bit because now we're in a time of famine or drought. Because we used up all of our resources up here, it drives the carrying capacity down a little bit. And where it used to be able to support this many number of organisms, now it can only support this many of organisms. And you'll see this a lot where it kind of dips down really, really low, and then it gets back close up to that carrying capacity, and then it's going to shoot down. Eventually it's going to level out where it's just very close to the carrying capacity, not really ever dipping too much and never really going over it. It's just going to sit there kind of close to the carrying capacity. So thank you all so much for making it here today. Your teacher has some other work for you to do, so make sure to give that your best effort, and I hope everybody has a great day.